This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co. Pals, greetings and welcome to another episode of Everything Endurance. Thank you very much for being here once more. Pull up a chair, make yourself comfortable. It's been 2 weeks. I hope you're all right with this new sort of slightly slower rhythm of the podcast. I've missed you a bit more, obviously, but hopefully the anticipation just makes you look forward to the podcast even more, right? That's how it works, right? And we did say that the reason that we were going to be slowing down output a little bit is because here at Beyond the Ultimate, we've got some new stuff in the works, right? We're going to be making some new announcements, right? Well, here we are. The time is upon us. We weren't kidding you. Right now it's the 16th of October. So if you are one of that cohort of wonderful people who downloads and streams and gets on board with this podcast like the second I put it out, and if that is who you are right now, then thank you. You guys are absolutely wonderful, including that guy in Panama who keeps downloading it. I don't know who you are, but seriously, get in touch. That's just wonderful. You're the only listener in your country, and I just think that's wonderful. But in any case, if you are one of those early adopters, then this morning, we have just announced our brand new race on the calendar. If I seem excited about that, you're just going to have to forgive me because, you know, anyone who has been involved in the events industry this year has had a difficult time, understandably. You know, we've just been having to postpone and put stuff off over and over and over again. And, it hasn't been a great deal of fun. We like getting out there amongst it and seeing people cross finish lines and have adventures and generally have a wonderful time of it. And now we get to announce something new and exciting and wonderful, and we are really chuffed about this. So we are talking April next year, date to be confirmed exactly, but April next year, we're looking at a 3-day, 125-kilometer race that brings a flavour of what we try and do out in these far-flung corners of the world to the UK. Now, it ain't like us to drop a race on our own doorsteps. So, we're not going to put it somewhere like the Midlands or somewhere really obvious. If we're going to do a race, we're going to go and look for a corner somewhere that's a little bit different, somewhere that's maybe not quite as well known yet, somewhere that's a little bit harder to get to, a little bit more difficult to reach. We found the perfect place. And it actually came up recently. Donnie Campbell mentioned it on the podcast I did with him. If you haven't listened to that yet, then go and listen to it. The guy is nails. But Donnie Campbell obviously set the record this summer for doing every Monroe in Scotland. So he passed through this area and mentioned it as somewhere that was particularly gnarly, particularly remote. And it was killing me at the time not mentioning to him that, actually, I know exactly what you mean, bud. We are talking about the Noidart Peninsula, which, for anyone who knows it, if you know the Noidart Peninsula, then no doubt you have already gone, get in, because you already know that we're talking about just one of the most beautiful corners of Scotland that you can conceive of, which makes it one of the most beautiful corners of the world. We're talking about an area that can only be reached either by sea or by a 16-mile hike over an area of mountain they call the Rough Bounds from the nearest road. So we are talking about somewhere here where you're going to feel like you're on another planet entirely, which is just wonderful. And the terrain is pure Lord of the Rings. I mean, I've seen it. Trust me, it's stunning. You're going to love this. So www.beyondtheultimate.co.uk. Go and register your interest now, and you'll be in among the group of people that get contacted as and when we sneak out news and get closer to this event, and you'll be among the first people who get an opportunity to sign up. And as with most of our races, there's not going to be a huge amount of spots, so you're going to need to move quick when it comes up. So register your interest now. Make sure you don't miss out on anything. While I'm pushing exciting new things, also it can't have escaped everyone's attention that we are now getting towards winter. The weather's getting a bit cooler. The nights are drawing in. It's raining a lot. I mean, I live in Sheffield. We see a lot of water falling from the sky here. And for that reason, our 2 jackets that we've talked about on the podcast before that we developed with Yeti and Nordisk. You'll have heard us talk about these before. They're our ultralight waterproof and our hard shell, and we're majorly excited about these as jackets. We got to be part of the process of testing the prototypes for these in all the different bonkers environments we work in around the world, and really driving them in the ground and seeing if they would do what they were supposed to do. And they just do. They've been wonderful. So the ultralight has now been worn by 2 winners of the Ice Ultra, and like as a crew, we've used it as just an extra sort of warm layer sitting around a cool campfire in Namibia in the middle of the evening. We've worn them out in the middle of the jungle, which is monsoon level rain, to see how they would handle that. We've tried them out and they just work. And it's called the ultralight. It is what it is. It packs away to nothing. It is a whisper in a back pocket that you can bring out as an extra windproof, waterproof as and when you need it. Go and have a look at that. That's just a great bit of kit. And the other one is the hard shell. And it is easy for me to talk that jacket up because we have now hit the point in the year where I am excited that it is cold enough that I can start wearing that jacket again. And I will probably be in it most of the way now through to next February. It'll be what I'm wearing while I'm working out in the Arctic. It is a down jacket, exceptionally well put together, like exceptionally hardy. It moves really well with you while we're out working or out hiking, whatever it is that you're doing in it. And it's genuinely incredibly warm as a down jacket, but also 100% waterproof, which is just not something you get combined very often. It's a really unique thing. We're really pleased with it. Both of them at the moment are £30 off. store.beyondtheultimate.co.uk. store.beyondtheultimate.co.uk. Go and have a look at them now. They're great bits of kit. That's kind of the businessy bit done, right? Now we can get into the podcasty bit. And I'm very, very excited about today's guest. I know I always am, but I really am. If there's been a running theme throughout this year's worth of podcasts, it has been the 3 letters F, K, and T. Okay, stripped of races that they can go out and race. The ultra running community has just been out there breaking records left, right, and centre, which has been fantastic for them. It's been fantastic for us people who are happy sitting on a sofa or an armchair watching the dots move around on the screen. And trust me, I am so happy doing that, and so many people seem to be. And I'm talking to someone here who used to take the mick out of people that were into cricket because I couldn't understand why you'd watched 5 days of one game. Well, here I am quite happily watching people out for weeks at a time when all I can see is a dot moving along the map and get the occasional tweet. And you get starved of information. You want to know more about what's going on. So you start following particular people who are involved in this scene. And I start realizing that this runner that I'm going to be talking to today is somehow involved, whether just as a commentator or he's been involved in helping to set the thing up, or he's been out there as a pacer or in some way supporting. There is one person who's been there as a sort of commentator throughout the whole thing. Someone of no little repute as an ultra runner themselves, someone with a habit of running disgustingly long distances and having a great time of it. And they have now published a book about this year of wonderful record breaking that we've all just been through. The book's called Broken, and I will make sure that there's a link down in the description and stuff, so that after you've listened to this podcast, as you will obviously want to go and buy the thing, have a look in the description below this podcast and you will find a link so that you can go and get it. This is a runner who really eschews this whole idea that you need to have a big social media presence if you're out there doing these really inspirational and bonkers distances events that he really likes to do. You will struggle to find this guy if you Google him. He has a blog out there, which is fantastic, and you should really look at the blog, and we'll get into the name of that in the podcast. But there is no way on earth you would find it by Googling this runner. You just wouldn't. The only place you're going to find sort of regular content from him, and I really recommend that you do follow him if you're looking for running news, is on Twitter. And this ultra runner turned writer is, of course, Ali Beaven. Ali, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm very, very well. I'm very pleased to be talking to you. You've had an exceptionally busy summer.
Yeah. Yeah, I have.
yeah, you absolutely have.
Which is a novel experience for me. That's not usually the case.
Well, I mean, between the dot watching and the running up and down hills helping people out, you must have covered a lot of miles over the course of this summer, which can't have been what you were expecting when we got locked down, right?
No, not really. Um, actually, if anything, writing the book has meant covering fewer miles than I maybe would have liked.
Yeah,
because it doesn't leave as much time for running as I would normally have.
No, that's it. You're an author now, mate. You have a sedentary life to look forward to.
Yeah, I look forward to all the back pain.
Well, I tell you what, we're going to get into the book a bit more a little bit later on. But firstly, this being your first appearance on this podcast, let's find out a little bit about you. And something else we're going to come on to later is you're not the easiest runner I've ever interviewed to find out a lot about. Like in this age where it seems like there's no point going out and covering a desperately long distance unless you're going to put up a published post about it somewhere for people to tag on social media. It's kind of refreshing to come across someone where Googling your name comes up with precisely 3 things. It's
nice.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So because I wasn't really able to do a lot of research about you, Ali, who the hell are you? Why are we talking to you today?
Well, that's an excellent question, isn't it? Who am I? I live in Speyside, near the Cairngorms. I work part-time in a bar and go running a lot.
Fantastic.
I suppose those are the bullet points. I don't really know what else to add.
No, that's fair enough, mate. You have dedicated yourself to a life of hills. And how did this come about? Were you someone who was brought up in a very, very sporty environment, or is running something you came to a bit later in life?
Yeah, later. My old coach, Martin Cox, has a section on his website that has just short bios of all the people he coaches. And there was something in there to the effect of, growing up in Orkney, Ali was always going to be a hill runner, which drove my mum mental because there aren't any hills in Orkney. I don't know if that was tongue in cheek or if he just, made it up because he thought it sounded good.
Yeah, I guess what you're talking about there is the Scottish equivalent of somebody growing up in Norfolk and claiming to be a hill runner. Like
pretty much.
You can't.
I mean, I've never been to Norfolk, but I've
never been to Orkney, but yeah, they're both very flat places, as far as I can tell.
Mostly.
Yeah.
I don't know, when did I start running? Well, I started running when I was living in Edinburgh. I was a student, and I just ran in the Pentlands a bunch, just sort of doing my own thing. And then the first hill race I ever did was the Pentland Skyline, because I was out running in the Pentlands and met a guy called Graham Nash, actually, who this year ran Ramsey's Round for the 6th time.
Wow.
And he asked if I was training for the Skyline, and I said, what's the Skyline? And it was the next weekend. So I thought, yeah, cool, I'll do that.
Well, in that case, yes, that is what I'm training for.
Yes, I didn't know it, but that is what I'm doing.
Oh, fantastic. And let's talk through some of your bigger races. Like, I know you've been out and had a go at the Barclay. Yeah,
I didn't exactly cover myself in glory.
Who does, right? Mainly you just cover yourself in mud and bruises.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I don't think you need to beat yourself up too much about
that. Yeah, keen to do that again. Unfinished business there. That was all a bit crap. What else have I done? I did a race in Andorra that doesn't exist anymore, which I keep remembering that the company's gone bust and being really upset about it. It was called Euphoria.
I'm sorry to have brought it up again. I take it you didn't have anything to do with the race not being there anymore.
Traumatic. No, well, it was because when they cancelled the race this year, they could only give people a 70% refund or something, because they're a professional race organisation. They've got rent and they've got salaries and they've got all this stuff that they need to spend money on. And then a bunch of arseholes gave them shit for it on the internet, and eventually they just decided, let's just shut up shop then. So there were the guys that did Rondadel Sims and
right,
that sort of stuff. It's a whole week of races, and Euphoria was this 230 kilometer race at 23,000 meters of climbing, and you did it in pairs, and there was only 4 aid stations, and it's in the Pyrenees, so it's all fucking steep, and it was incredible. It was so good, and it's not there anymore.
Oh man, that's desperately
Which is a
sad.
shame, isn't
And
it?
there you go. I mean, so many run event companies have been absolutely against the wall this year.
Yeah,
That's desperately sad. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm also sorry I accused you of having something to do with the downfall of that race there. I was definitely only joking. It sounds to me like you have a particular passion for that type of thing as well. Like you're either out doing your own thing or you're out looking for rugged, wild, not wholly supported, not thousands of people. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I like all sorts, really. Like, I guess Scottish Hill Rings like that. You're fairly. Most races aren't, knee deep in aid stations or anything like that. You're kind of doing your own thing. But I mean, there's plenty of the big glitzy ultras that I'd quite like to do. Like I did Trophy Okima a couple of years ago, and you go to that, and there's, the finished straight's got a fucking red carpet and 8 of those inflatable arches, and there's like salmon banners everywhere and all that sort of crap, and it was still amazing because the course is fucking phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So
all sorts, whatever.
What takes you out there? Because to the uninitiated, and not everybody listening to this podcast is a runner of disgusting distances such as yourself. What is it that draws you out into these beautiful but ultimately very challenging environments and makes you beat the hell out of yourself for hours at a time?
Well, because it's beautiful and challenging.
There you go. I answered my own question there, which is really unwise as a podcast host.
You don't need me here, man. You could do this all yourself. Yeah, I don't think it's that complicated, is it? Like, difficult things are rewarding. If you like the aesthetics of being in the mountains, then go and do stuff in the mountains. That makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah. Ultimately, it does. I can't argue with that logic, Ali. That's cold and clinical. Yeah, fair enough. Well, in that case, let's come on to what we actually came to talk about here, which is your book that you have coming up. Let's start off. Give me the blurb. What is the book that's about to be published?
It's a book. It is called Broken, which is a good title because I didn't come up with it. There is a subtitle that explains what it's actually about, but I can't remember what it is. It's about a whole load of the different records, FKTs, whatever you want to call them, that have been set this summer. Some of it is first-hand. I was out and supported a bunch of people doing a bunch of different things, so that's in there. But then some of it is not first-hand. I've just spoken to people who've gone and done stuff and then written about that. Something it isn't is an almanac. There was talk of putting in a comprehensive list of everything that had been done this summer, but I think I've managed to convince them that is a shit idea. Because it's one thing for your run not to get a dedicated chapter. It's quite another thing to be left off this list of everything.
The list is wild,
you're just
right?
setting yourself up to upset people. And it would take up like 30 fucking pages.
Yeah, it absolutely would. Just out of reference, I had a look on the FKT website again this morning while I was sort of getting ready for this podcast, and I was baffled to see how many new records are still popping up just on a daily basis. There were sort of 4 or 5 that are being tracked now that I didn't even know anything about. So that list would have to have been massive, and you were bound to rub someone up the wrong way, right?
Oh yeah,
absolutely. And, this is mainly, your name has been like a running theme through my summer, because I've been interviewing a few of these people that are out there doing FKTs. Now, everybody mentions Ali. You seem to have been in some way involved or all up in every other FKTer's business this summer. So when I saw that you... All right, I didn't choose great words when I came out with that sentence, Ali. I'm doing this off the cuff. You'll have to forgive me. But... You seem to have been involved in an awful lot of what was going on this summer, so I wasn't entirely surprised after a summer of your sort of low-key Twitter commentary on everything that was happened to find out that someone had cornered you and pinned you down and made you write a book about it all. So when did that start? Where did the idea for this book come from? And when did you actually start rattling a keyboard?
The idea for it came from Kirsty Reid, who works for Vertebrate. I keep getting that wrong. I keep calling them Invertebrate, which would be like, I don't know, a publisher of satirical mountaineering books as opposed to serious mountaineering books.
I mean, there's an idea there for anyone if they want to pick up and run with it.
Exactly.
Ideal.
I just got out of bed one morning and had a message from Kirsty saying, "Have you ever considered writing a book?" This is a loaded question. And straight away I had a ton of ideas, stuff I'd already been thinking about, writing about, trying to get people to let me write articles for their websites or whatever. And quite a lot of that stuff actually made it into the book. But this was in early mid-August, I suppose. And initially the publisher said, "Wouldn't it be lovely if the book was finished at the end of August?" And I said, "Yes, it would be lovely."
A loaded statement to follow that loaded question.
Exactly. So I ended up handing it in at the end of September. So about 6 weeks to write the whole thing.
That's outrageous. And, it's a sizable book. Yeah. It's not a pamphlet we're talking about.
I have no experience of this, so I have no frame of reference. But apparently that's quite a rapid turnaround.
Yeah, mate, that's definitely a rapid turnaround. What you've got here is your own literary FKT, which is, thematically fantastic, given what the book's actually about. So I know, obviously, as you said, you can't go out there and do an exhaustive list of everyone, but what does get featured prominently in there? Who's made the cut?
Well, so the people I got out with were Ian Stewart, who ran what he called it the Cairngorm Park Run. It was all the Cairngorms and all the Munros in the Cairngorm National Park. It's like 400 kilometres, and most of it's crap. Like he'd tell you that himself.
Okay, fair enough.
That's a record that may never be broken because no one else is going to be dumb enough to try it. I'm sure Ian won't mind me saying that.
Fantastic. But as somebody fairly uninitiated with the Cairngorms, why is that crap?
There's loads of really, really good running in the Cairngorms. There are loads
for any
of areas.
Cairngorms fans out there. So.
Yeah, exactly. There are loads of areas where you can take off a load of Munros really, really quickly. Like Sasha Shepland broke the 24-hour Munro record in the Cairngorms this summer. But joining up those areas is an absolute pain in the arse. You're just wading through heather and tussock and all that sort of crap for hours on end. Like his first Munro was Mount Keene, and the next Munro is in a straight line 17 kilometres away.
Yeah.
And nobody goes between those two hills. It's Mount Keene to Lochnagar. And so you're just questing off in a whole load of nothing.
Sounds absolutely delightful. You're really selling it. But I mean,
yeah.
Hats off to the man that's managed to do this record. And who else? Who else were you actually out in the wild?
I was out with Donnie Campbell.
Fantastic. Who was out there for about a year, as far as I could tell?
Well, yeah, he was out for a really, really long time, but also a really, really short time.
Yeah, incredible. Well, I had Donnie's one of the people I did manage to interview over the summer, and I couldn't get over the numbers of his record. It's absolutely staggering. Yeah,
I kept forgetting that he was out there. I could go a couple of days and I'd be like, oh shit, where's Donnie? And you go off and look at the tracker, and it's just, I was blown away by that. That was incredible.
He might as well have been in space for how far away and how isolated he was through that period of time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I was out with him. I was out with John Kelly. I did a leg of Barrington's round with him, which was harrowing.
That's very much the impression I got of his Ramsey round when I spoke to him. It sounded difficult.
And Dan Lawson. Yeah, I was out with Dan for an evening on Land's End to John O'Groats, which was something a bit different. running up the side of the dual carriageway on the A9.
Oh yeah, of course. Very different
Opening
territory for you.
experience. Yeah.
And the rest of it, I take it, once you'd signed up to this book as well and you were committed to having to do it, you must have been pinned to the dot watching over the course of the summer. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'd already done... I mean, in the same way that me running in the Pentlands was training for the skyline that I didn't know was training for the skyline, me possibly wasting quite a lot of my time staring at people's trackers was research for the book that I didn't know was research for the book. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff had already been and gone by the time the book was a thing. Like James Stewart's John Muirway records, Bruno Burgess, horrendous time on the Wainwrights is in there. Yeah.
And then some people really consider it and then didn't use a tracker, so I didn't have to spend my days sitting inside. Like Beth Pascal and Finlay Wild, those guys didn't have trackers. I could just speak to them afterwards and
which was
get the lowdown from them.
Beth Pascal I hadn't heard anything about until it was all over and done with, which was that was an incredible bit of work. And Sabrina, that sounded like a hellishly tough run that she put herself through, and congratulations to her on the staggering effort. I mean, we talked to Paul Tierney after he did the Wainwrights, and that's a lot of big numbers as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So dot watching seems to have become very much a pastime. There's now almost a way of sort of consuming ultra running that has really played into people like me who are very much armchair ultra enthusiasts. It's been absolutely fantastic. We felt very linked to the action in a way that we never really have been before. And I know, because I sort of work behind the scenes on the spine as well, and I'm always... well, at first at least, was flabbergasted by how many people are inspired by what these guys are out there doing in the wild and are willing to sit themselves at a laptop and watch a dot move across a screen for hours at a time to feel involved in what they're doing. And I think it's fantastic. That's what it's looked like to me across the summer as well, is that there's been a community out there that can't actually link to each other by going out to races, but have found a way of staying linked to each other instead. Is that how it's looked from your side, or am I just being disgustingly sentimental here?
I mean, yeah, no, I think so. But I think the spine was the first thing that I really sat and dot watched. I guess for a race like that, there's a massive safety element to it. It's not just the entertainment value, questionable as that might be. And I have no interest in doing the Pennine Way. It sounds horrible, but for a week every January, I think, maybe it'd be all right. It feels like something I'd quite like to be involved in.
Well, I'll be there in January. It'd be good to see it.
I won't. I mean, that feeling does not last beyond the end of the race, really.
There's really nothing we could do to encourage you to take on the Pennine Way.
Oh God, I don't know. Give me £1 million, I'd probably do it for that.
Well, fair enough. I mean, you've already got the haircut for it, right? Was this Damien Hall first, or was this you?
No, it was Damien first. Yeah, and I'm kind of, I don't know. I feel like I'm committed to it now.
Yeah.
And how do you cut off your mohawk? Like that's such a capitulation, isn't it?
I think so, dude. In 2014, I did Movember. And I looked horrendous. I mean, this is difficult for the people who are watching this on YouTube, which I'm sure is all of 4 or 5 people. Or it's only for the benefit of them. But I'm a distinctly bald man. If you take away my goatee, I'm a thumb in glasses.
Yeah.
So you can. When I went down to a mustache, that was like all you could see. It was screaming at people off the middle of my face. But once I'd done it, I ended up keeping that mustache for 13 months.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. It was terrible. But I was really proud of it. I'd say my mustache was 18 times worse than your mohawk is. That is a perfectly good mohawk that you should keep for as long as you feel like doing.
I feel like I need to trim it. It's getting a bit long. And if it gets too long, it gets a bit Phil Anselmo, which maybe isn't the best look.
There's a niche reference, but yeah, I'll high five you for a Phil Anselmo reference. I never thought we'd get one of them on the show. Oh, fantastic. Let's get in the nitty gritty of this then. Let's talk about the highs and lows of the book. You've sort of either been out there face to face with these people, or you've interviewed them and kept up to date with what they're doing. And you know, we were not wanting to ruffle any feathers, but whose was the most horrendous effort? Like, who went out there and bit off the biggest thing to chew?
Well, I mean, Donnie, obviously. In literal terms,
I'd kind of queued that up a little bit.
There's nothing that compares with that in the UK in terms of scale. But he kind of made it look a bit easy. And it's funny because I think that over the course of his Monroe round, Donnie probably got more sleep than I did. You know, he's getting a full night's sleep every night.
Yeah,
whereas somebody who's doing something still very long but shorter is kind of riding that line in a much more acute fashion. So people like Dan Lawson and Carla Molinaro.
Yeah.
And when Dan, when was I out with him? Day 8, I think. The end of that, he was pretty much lifted into a van to eat his coal scampi and chips off the dashboard. And the fact that guy got up 6 hours later, whatever it was, and kept going for another 48 hours, I barely understand that. I don't know how that works. Like, he pushed himself so hard, and in such a shitty environment as well. Like, he's running up the A9, it's a horrible road.
Yeah.
God, I don't fancy that.
No.
Fun. But then on the other hand,
that particular type of challenge just sounds incredibly grueling.
And I've been speaking to a few people about the Fell Running Association Long Distance Award.
Yeah.
Which they give out every year for I think either someone who lives in the UK or Brits doing things abroad outside of racing. And like, there are years where they don't give it out because they don't think there are any suitable candidates. No one's done anything good enough. But this year, there's this.
Oh man, what are they going to do?
Of riches to choose from.
Yeah.
And my thinking for that always ends up on two separate lines. One is the really, really long Donnie Campbell Hero Award, essentially.
Yeah.
But then the sort of 24 hours and below things where it's just athleticism, pretty much. Where it's just someone putting out a really impressive amount of horsepower for a really long time. And for that, like, Best Bob Graham, Finley's Ramsey's round, Kim's 24-hour record.
Yeah.
George Foster's Bob Graham from this weekend just been.
I missed that entirely.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
1344.
I'm so sorry. There you go. I've offended someone.
Yeah.
Sorry, say that
George
number
is going
again.
to put a jobby through your letterbox. Yeah, 13. Sorry, I'll give you a second. 1344.
Wow, incredible.
Faster than Billy Bland.
Wow.
Second fastest time ever in October. So I think he had good weather, but underfoot, like one must have been horrendous.
Surely.
Must have been really slow. Like going up the back of Blencathra must have been.
Yeah, it's a good weather, but it's still October underfoot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. And who out of everyone that you did manage to see out on the trail, who was the most broken? And I'm trading on the name of your book here, which, you know, as we established, you didn't come up with. No worries.
I get a bung from the publishers every time someone says it.
Fantastic. So who was the most broken?
That's not true.
Of all the broken people?
John.
I had a feeling you might say John.
Well, just because of when I was out with him. Like, if I'd been out with Ian Stewart at the end of his park run, maybe it would be him. But yeah, we were overnight, 5 days in, and it was kind of scary, actually. Made me quite uncomfortable at times. That he was just so cold and so tired. And the solutions to those two things are mutually exclusive. If you're really, really sleepy, you need to stop and sleep. But if you stop and sleep, you're going to get hypothermia. And if you need to warm up, either put more clothes on, and we were, between us, already wearing all our clothes, or you start trying really hard, and you couldn't try really hard because it was, well, you could try really hard, but you couldn't run faster because he was just so tired. And the weather was, it was bad. It wasn't that bad, but I'm saying that as someone who was fresh.
Yeah.
When you've been out for 5 days and you can't thermoregulate properly anymore, it was probably felt pretty horrendous.
Yeah. And for anyone that isn't up on what John did, this was the end of the grand round, wasn't it, that you saw him on? So he's done the Bob Graham, he's done the Paddy Buckley, cycled to the Lake District, done the Bob Graham, cycled all the way up into Scotland, and you met him on the Ramsey 5 days into having done all that. So yeah. I can imagine he was very broken up by that point. Yeah,
I think did he say to you guys that it was the worst he's ever felt?
Yeah, something like
that. Specifically while he was out with me. Don't read too much into that, though. Which, for someone with John's palmarès, is saying quite a lot. Like he's on the Pennine Way, Summer, Winter, Barclay and Tor and all that stuff. Yeah.
And I saw John, I think it was 3 days in, it might have been 3 days in, I'm not sure, to the Spine in January. He'd just gone through that storm that came through early on in the race, and it had been absolutely disgusting. Storm Brendan, or whatever it was that they dubbed it. And he came into a checkpoint and left half an hour later, and left all of us looking at each other going, is he okay? Like, we've never seen anyone so tired to the point where his voice was barely registerable. You had to listen in to hear anything out of him, and we were really genuinely worried about him. Fine, got up, pulled himself together, and got on with it. Won that race by a long distance. And I didn't think, and when I spoke to him about that afterwards, he didn't seem to think that was any more than, a bit of a blip, a bit of a low point he'd had there. Yeah. So I can't imagine what state you found him in on that Ramsey round. He must have been digging deep.
When we came down off the hill, we came down to Lochtrigg Dam, and because he was in such a state, and because the 24-hour thing was obviously no longer viable, I had kind of been assuming that you would take a decent break. Like, you would say, okay, we'll sleep for 3 hours, eat a proper meal, and get going again. But he lay down for like 40 minutes. Don't know how much sleep he actually got in that time, and then got up and kept going with his 8 coats on. It was wild.
Wow. Anyone come in a close second?
Of the people I was out with.
I'm looking for the gory details here.
Well, I'd probably Dan and Ian tied for second, I think. I think Dan was at his worst after I was with him, when he was up sort of north of the Black Isle.
You're becoming the common denominator here again, Ali. We need to steer away from that.
Yeah, I know. And Ian was just completely burst by the end of his parkrun thing. He was just... when I was speaking to him about it, he was talking about how there was no sense at all of celebration at the end. Like, when he got to the top of Cairngorm, which was the last minute, or when he got down to Car Park, which was the end of the whole thing, it was just, can I go home now, please? Run all the enthusiasm out of himself.
Well, you say this, that you've kind of preempted one of my questions, which I had coming up, was, you might not necessarily have been there at the finish of all of these challenges, but you've spoken to the runners. And I can't imagine, like, if you are at the end of Land's End to John O'Groats, or you're at the end of whatever disgustingly big challenge you've done, your finish line is probably, a sign or a lay-by or a tree somewhere that you're coming up to on your own, possibly in freezing drizzle at 4:00 in the morning. So I can't imagine that they're these big jubilant moments that they really should be.
Freezing drivel should be the title of this episode of the podcast.
Yeah, it may well be. Yeah, there's still time. I wasn't fixed on a name yet. Freezing drivel, we'll have that. But what are these guys like at the end of one of these runs? Did anyone celebrate? Has anyone got it in them to do a Dick Van Dyke style heel click in celebration, or is it just thank God that's over?
I was at the end of Donny's Monroe round at the top of Ben Hope. It was dark and claggy and kind of cold. Because I don't know how closely you followed the end of it, but there was this 48-hour push.
We talked through it a lot on the podcast.
Yeah, 4 days worth of schedule in 2 days. But then on the way up the last hill, the plan ostensibly was to be up there for sunrise. On the way up, he decided he wanted to finish before 31 days and 23 hours, which, as arbitrary targets go, is spectacularly arbitrary.
41 days, 23 hours.
31 days, 23 hours. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so he just ran away from all the people that were there to run with him. Just dropped them. this guy had been on the go for a month, and all these people were like, oh, shit, I can't keep up. And so there was 4 people at the top when he got there. And because it's dark and it's claggy, this head torch just appears out of the mark. And you think it's probably someone who's run on ahead to say that he's arriving so that the camera dude can point his camera in the right direction and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't. It was Donny. And we didn't notice that until he was there, like 3 meters from the cairn. So he sort of slaps it. And like instantaneously, it's done. Like over a month's worth of effort is just over. And no one really knows what to do.
What do you do?
Well, if you're Donny, you complain that you missed your 23-hour target by 2 minutes. He broke the record by over a week, and he was pissed off about that 2 minutes.
And, talking about incredible numbers around he beat his record by over a week.
Yeah.
Which is just incredible. But one of the things I was going to ask you as well was, we've talked about who was in the most disgusting state while they were out there doing these big challenges. But one thing I want to ask about was who, for you, which was sort of the most impressive record in that sense? Who took the biggest bite out of what was previously there? And it's going to be hard not to mention Donny there, given, a calendar week.
The problem with Donny is that the margin was so big that it forces you to question any assumptions that you've made about previous record, right? Not that Stephen Pike's record was soft, but like if Donny's breaking it by a week, I really struggle to know what to think.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's just wild. I think the one that surprised me the most was probably Beth's Bob Graham.
Yeah.
And in part that's because, there was no tracker or anything. So the first you know of it is a picture of her standing in front of Moot Hall with a pint with 4 digits next to it. And you're like, fuck, that's fast. Yeah. And because it was a Jasmine Paris record,
yes,
who until that run we just assumed was the generational talent for that sort of distance and that sort of terrain. And I think even beforehand, most people would have edged it in favour of Jasmine over Beth just because they thought that terrain favoured Jasmine more. Apparently not.
Yeah, apparently not. I get what you mean. After that spine performance that she put in as well, I'd have backed Jasmine Paris to hold that record 100%. But
that's what makes it so exciting, I suppose. Like the prestige of these records is built upon the people who hold them. And so breaking a record by a big margin is one thing, but breaking a record by a big margin, which was previously held by someone of Jasmine's standing, is just fucking amazing.
Yeah, absolutely incredible performance. And that reminds me as well, have there been any other instances over the summer of a single record going more than once? Now, I know, obviously, I'm thinking about Damien Hall doing the Pennine Way FKT less than a week after John Kelly had beaten himself up doing exactly the same thing. Which is very rude of Damien, really, and I do keep saying that.
I wrote, there's pretty much a whole chapter about Nikki Ligo, who was John's crew. And there was a line from her that didn't make it into the book, but which I loved. Something along the lines of, it's a fucking disgrace that those guys couldn't get their diaries coordinated to do that at the same time. Because that had initially been the plan. They were going to go simultaneous opposite directions, which would have been fucking incredible. That would have been so much fun. But for whatever reason, they didn't do it.
That would have made a race of it. I'll
never forgive them for it.
No, absolutely never.
The women's record for the Cairngorm 4000s got broken twice, which I was embarrassingly excited about. Because that record, like for the last 5 years, I've been trying to convince pretty much every woman I know to go and have a go at that record, because it had only been, there was only one record, and it was from the 80s, and it was like 2 3/4 hours slower than the men's record, and the men's record is 4 hours. So it was soft. It was really soft. So to see that go twice, Katie Henderson and Caroline Marwick broke it. Personally, I was mega excited about that. The Dartmoor round, there's a chapter in there about Joe Meek on that, and nailing down exactly what the Dartmoor round is kind of complicated. But if you take quite a sort of broad definition, I think the record's been broken 4 times this summer.
Oh, wow. Wow, incredible.
Yeah, which is really cool.
Yeah,
really, really cool.
Yeah.
There was something else. I was on the FKT website, something in London, like the Capitol Ring, which sounds, I'm
not going to dig too much into that.
Don't.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, which was broken like 4 or 5 times. It's really cool because it sort of fast tracks the process of these things becoming worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Usually, you look at the Pennine Way record or the Lakeland 24-hour record, and it's taken decades or a century for it to become what it is. And you can never, fully bypass the sort of prestige that comes from a record being that old, but having it passed through loads of pairs of hands adds a certain luster to it, I think.
Well, you've positioned yourself effectively, whether you wanted to or not, as a commentator for this.
Positioned myself on the sofa.
It's the best place to be, mate. I keep telling people that. But you've kind of ended up positioned as a commentator for this summer of FKTs that we had for this balmy year. And is it the amount of records that have gone down this year? Is it just all to do with our circumstances, with lockdown meaning all the races were cancelled, so people had to go and change their plans? Will we ever see a summer like this again?
This stuff's always been a part of the sport, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these records predate any bit of what we might consider the modern racing scene, right? So the Lakeland 24-hour record, depending on how you define it, is 150 years old, and UTMB's 15 years old, right? And quite a lot of this stuff, people were planning on doing it anyway. So James Stewart's, John Muir Wade, that was going to happen anyway. Donny's Monroe round, that was his plan all along. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these are quite competitive people, and they need an outlet, right? So I speaking to Beth, and the sort of theme of that conversation was that she will always prefer racing. There might have been a time where she would have sacrificed a race to do the Bob Graham, maybe, but if all the races had been on, she would have done Western States and UTMB this year.
Yeah.
And probably next year, maybe the year after that. So people have spoken about this stuff as being, incredible and remarkable. And it is, but it's not surprising. Right? If you've got all these national and international standard athletes with nothing else to do, this is exactly what you would expect to happen. And the standard's been outrageous.
Yeah, it really has.
But I don't know. I there's something I've asked a few people about, actually, is whether this year will change how they do things in future years, if it's given them a different perspective. Travel's one thing people have mentioned, like how you justify traveling all over the world to race in terms of its environmental impact. And so if there are these prestigious, competitive records closer to home, maybe people would spend more time on those.
Well, it's definitely accelerated that conversation, hasn't it? That I'd heard a lot of talk over the last couple of years about being more ethical in your choices of where you race. Damien Hall again's obviously a sort of become a bit of a spokesperson for that attitude of not traveling to these international races, and in a position where our hands have been forced and no one's been able to sort of flash their passport about much this year. It's really pushed that conversation to the fore.
Yeah. There's like Finlay doing all his stuff in October. He's been getting the train to races in Europe for years. But I guess, if you're Beth Pascal, you can't get the train to Western States. Doesn't really work.
No, definitely not. You've talked to most of these guys now, and as we've established, like, you get to the finish of one of these big challenges, you get freezing drivel, and if you're lucky, some half-eaten cold scampi and chips off a dashboard. What you don't get is what you should have, which is some kind of firework display and a monument built in your honor. If these were people involved in an athletic discipline like, sprinting or something like that, if they'd chosen football as their outlet in competitive sport, then potentially, we'd be reading books written by all these people and they'd be making huge endorsements and appearing in TV adverts. But this isn't the scene that we're operating in. So given that these guys aren't out there doing these incredibly long, challenging things to make millions of pounds, you've talked to a lot of them now. You're a part of this scene. What has motivated them to go out and do this stuff to themselves? What makes them? Is there a unifying thing? And I'm asking you for a big answer here, but you've talked to a much bigger cross section of these guys than I have.
I mean, it does vary. I mean, there's an element of what we spoke about before about challenging things are rewarding and the hills are a nice place to be, right?
Yeah.
But there are people whose reasons are almost conflicting. Like, you speak to Beth and she's all about the competition. She wants things to be competitive. That's why she did the Bob Graham, because it was a Jasmine Paris record and it was highly regarded, and she needed something that was challenging for someone who's at her level.
Yeah.
But then you contrast that with Finlay, who is similarly talented, and he's just a bit of a sort of misty-eyed mountain hippie, isn't he? He just likes going out in the mountains, and that's his main motivation. And like, if you twisted his arm and said, right, you can only run races or just go out and muck around, he'd probably take the mucking around. And because that's, his background is from going hill walking and going climbing rather than like racing cross country when he was a kid or something.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Someone like Dan Lawson, I don't know, there must just be something wrong with him.
I mean, Dan, if you are listening by any chance, I'm sure that's not the case. But
Dan's great. Dan's amazing. Speaking to Dan was like a palate cleanser from all the other conversations I had. Like, if you speak to Beth, she can tell you how many grams of carbs she can eat an hour on a long run. I think it's 83. You speak to John Kelly, and he can give you a really good estimate of the average pace that he can maintain up a 5% moderately boggy hill after 35.5 hours of effort. And the fact that they know those things is great. It's part of what makes them really, really good. You speak to Dan, and he'll tell you about the cosmic energy that carried him through Fife on day whatever of his run. He's brilliant. He's amazing.
I've got all the time in the world for that. Like, John Kelly's approach is inspirational. If you're that kind of person, then great. He has a data scientist's approach to ultra running. But I've only interviewed Dan once, and it was at a 24-hour event a few years ago. And yeah, he just doesn't talk the way the other runners do.
No,
he seems to have drifted to that event and will let his energy carry him through it, and then drifts away. He's very enigmatic. I know.
Yeah.
I got a lot of time for the guy.
It was quite weird, like when we were running together, and we're running up the side of a dual carriageway, and there's these like bloody lorries flying by, and the conversation was all about connectedness with nature, which seemed really, I don't know, inappropriate, yet at the same time, coming from him, made total sense.
Yeah. Dan could get away with that. If I started a conversation like that, no one would have any time for it. Dan absolutely is speaking from a position of authority when he says that kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, incredible. Often at this point, I'll sort of talk to people about, where can people? It's the plug time, and I'd be pointing people in the direction of their Instagram or their website or whatever. Not quite so easy to do with you, Ali, but the quick potato blog, that's you, isn't it?
Oh Jesus, yeah, it is.
Mate, I really like your writing.
At best, I suppose.
Oh, that's good. You're just keeping us waiting. You're building anticipation.
Yes, it's deliberate. That's what I'm doing.
There you go. We can say that it was a tactic. But yeah, if anyone is wanting to know anything more about you personally and about, your own experiences out there, quick potato. Why is it called that? I wasn't going to ask Ali, but I am now.
Had to be called something, didn't it?
You didn't name your book, but you did name this.
Yeah, one of my friends knew 2 phrases of German. One of them was quick potato. The other was I would like a youth hostel with cake, but that would be a really, really long URL. So quick potato just made more sense.
Oh, well, yeah, fair enough. Yeah. It was a 50-50 really, wasn't it? And you had to come down on that side. But yeah, no, I absolutely recommend that people go and do that. And in terms of, pushing your book now, where should people go and look if they want to read Broken?
They can pre-order it off the Vertebrate Publishing website. If you just Google Vertebrate Publishing Broken, I assume you will find it. Signed copies, no less. I've been trying to convince them that they should get them signed by someone other than me, but apparently that idea is a non-starter.
Signed or doodled in, I believe. Yeah. Your Twitter is the reason that I now know the word, and you'll have to forgive my pronunciation here, but Bobby?
There you go. Pretty much that. Yeah.
Was that all right?
Yeah. Can I just make it really clear that Rob Sinclair is to blame for that?
Okay.
West Highland Way record holder and aficionado of poorly drawn genitalia.
So he will be receiving a book with poorly drawn genitalia in it.
Oh yeah. Yes, he will.
That being the meaning of Bobby for the other English people or wherever else you are in the world.
And also, so I will be drawing a Bobby for Bobby, essentially.
Yeah, well, fantastic. That's very, very fitting. I'll come up with something a little more elaborate as a request when I pre-order the book. I
do have very limited artistic skill.
I don't think you'll need a lot of skill for what I've got in mind.
I hate to think.
And what about you personally? We haven't talked very much about you as a runner. You've now, it's been very inspirational this summer watching people out there doing these big, disgustingly long challenges. But I'm doing it very much from the point of view of somebody from their sofa, not really planning on putting myself in that arena straight away, sort of thing. Things are a bit different for you after this summer of watching other people breaking records. Have you got your eye on something now?
I had plans for a Ramsey's round or a Rigby's round this autumn, but then sitting in front of a laptop all day for 6 weeks kind of put training on the back burner for that. I'm just training for next year now, actually. I quite like the training, like just putting together blocks. It's quite fun. And then I mean, who fucking knows what next year will look like? Maybe I'm training for races. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just wasting my time. I should just get back on the sofa. I don't know. And I'd like to do something really long next year. Actually, I'm going to put in for Tor again. It's just been a few years since I've done something that makes you hallucinate, and that's it's fun.
And let's stick to the running to reach those hallucinations, right?
Well, if there are shortcuts available, maybe that would be a wise thing to do. It's probably cheaper. Just do it in your house rather than like going out to Italy and knocking about in the
I see what you're saying, and I certainly wouldn't try and combine the two in any way. I can't imagine that would make either experience better in any way.
I wouldn't know, obviously.
Well, there's some homework to do. Yeah, fair enough, Ali. And look, I don't want to get you in any further trouble, so I think it just remains for me to say, once again, thank you. Thank you for chatting to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
And seriously, if you're reading this, go out and look up Quick Potato, because Ali's writing is fantastic to read. It's an absolute pleasure. On there and
do a lot of filtering, and I just take off all the stuff that's shit.
Well, there you go, Ali. That's the rest of your day planned.
Yeah.
And definitely go and pre-order the book. It's been an absolutely incredible summer, and I've loved being able to talk to some of these FKTers. Ali today is someone who's been much, much more involved and basically is the commentator of the FKT world now. So get out there, get that book pre-ordered, and there you go. There's your Christmas present sorted. You can buy one for everyone, you know.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, Ali, enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, man.